Hi, my name is Mark Danenhauer, and I'm the author of Jake's Nature Guide, Rocky Mountains. And I want to thank Mountain Mom for inviting me to come on today and share 4 Rocky Mountain plants and animals that are special to me as part of her Thankful for Nature Outdoors challenge. Um, and obviously, so I wrote this book about the Rocky Mountains. This book covers everything from birds to fungi to flowers, amphibians. So I know a little bit about everything, and there's a lot of ones that are very special to me. And I think it's really amazing because all around us in the natural world, we're surrounded by so many different forms of life. So I'm going to talk about a couple, a bird, an insect, a mammal, and then also one that's not actually a plant or an animal, but is a fungus. So the first animal that I'm going to talk about, special to me, well, I guess the first one I'm going to talk about is the fungus. So this one here is what I want to mention is special to me. It's this one called a Braket fungus. So this is a whole kind of fungus. It's not just one specific species or type, but there are many different kinds of these. And these fungus grow on the trunks of living or dead trees. And this fungus here is actually very hard. You can touch it, it's solid. You could try to push it off the tree, but it just won't budge. And what I think is so special about this fungus is you can see it almost anytime you go out in the woods. If you look over on a tree, you may find one in different colors. And it's just a good example to explain a little bit about what a fungus is. So before, I used to think a fungus was just like a mushroom. There it was popping up out of the ground. It'd be a big mushroom. But little did I know that the mushroom is really just what produces the new fungus. It's how the fungus reproduces. It's like how an apple tree reproduces by seeds, and those seeds are inside of apples. Most of the time, the tree doesn't have apples, but when it's ready to reproduce, it grows apples, and then that's the fruiting part of the tree to help it reproduce. Well, so for a fungus, the mushroom is just like the apple. The mushroom, when it's ready to produce, whoop, it grows, and then that mushroom, rather than have seeds, it actually has spores, which is another way that different forms of life reproduce. So the spores can drop out of it, and hopefully they land in a good spot and allow that fungus to reproduce. What I think is interesting, what I like to share, and when I first learned this, I share this with my kids. You can see this diagram here about exactly what is a fungus. And so the majority of the fungus is either in the ground or in the trunk of the tree. You can't see it. It's just all these tiny little threads, almost like a spider web. And that's called the hypha. And the actual mushroom is just what poop pops up here, and it's only when it's ready to reproduce. So for the bracket fungus, let's say for example this one here, it's growing on the trunk of the tree, and that means that tree is full of that hypha, which is the actual fungus. And then what we see here is where it's ready to reproduce. So that's one thing that I'm thankful for, that it kind of has a special place for me, because that's the first. Bracket fungus is what I used to help learn all about fungus and how fungus reproduce, and also the different kinds of fungus. Really, before I move on, so fungus, I used to think, we're all taught as kids, mushrooms help decompose dead wood and things. So it's a decomposer. But there are actually 3 different types of fungus. There are decomposers, there are parasites, which just live off another living thing and slowly kill it. And then there's another one that's called a mutualist. Mutualists are ones who live on another living organism, but they benefit each of them. And surprisingly, most trees out there have many different fungus living on their roots. And so those are mutualist fungi. So that's my first one. The second one that I will move on to here in my book is this little guy. This is one of my favorites. You can see him. It's a yellow-bellied marmot. So, marmots are a mammal. I think these are such neat mammals. I think for me, why they're so special is because they're not something that you just go walk around in the park and you can see it, like a bird or some insects or a deer or something. But you actually have to go up into the mountains and go into certain areas. And the first time I really started seeing marmots is when I was doing a lot of hiking when I was younger with better knees, hiking up into high elevations and getting towards that alpine zone where there's just not a lot of life. And you'd see these big kind of scree slopes or rock fields, and then living in those is where you find marmots. They are very tough little creatures. In the Rocky Mountains, there are two different species of marmots. There's the yellow-bellied marmot, and there's also a hoary marmot. The hoary marmots are the ones that live very high up at the very tops of the peaks, above 11,000 feet. And the yellow-bellied marmots, they live a little bit lower in elevation. And these are special to me because for me, they're kind of iconic for what the Rocky Mountains are. The Rocky Mountains, for me, are these big, towering, amazing mountains. And to get to the tops of the mountain requires a lot of effort, a lot of exertion. And then to get up there and see these animals that spend their whole lives up there it's just amazing because they're so hard, because they spend half their life in hibernation. Because think about high in the mountains, it snows a lot, it's cold, so they're spending that whole time down in their dens, hibernating. And then when they come out of hibernation for that short summer period, they're just eating away, and they're herbivores. So that's the second animal I want to talk about. The third one is another one. It's this one. It's a bird. It's this Blackcapped Chickadee. So this bird is special to me because it's another animal that's just kind of indicative for the Rocky Mountains for me. It's one that you will see all over the place. You can see it in the summertime, and you can even see it in the wintertime. And I think it's neat. It's a tiny bird. It's only about 4.5 to 6 inches big, but it's a black cap, so its whole head is black. It's a tiny little guy. You'd think it wouldn't do very well in the wintertime. It would be migrating, going elsewhere. So what birds do, birds in winter in the Rocky Mountains, birds will either migrate long distance, like head south to the southern United States, Central America, or even South America. Some of them will just kind of move to lower elevations, but some of them just stay where they are. And black-capped chickadees are one that actually stay in the Rocky Mountains during the wintertime. So you can't see a lot of birds during the winter, but when there's a period where maybe there's no snow falling, it's sunny, look out your window. You may see one of these little guys hanging out, active, flying around, looking for some food, something to eat. And I think it's amazing because they're out there, and then even when that giant snowstorm comes rolling in and it's freezing cold, they're still out there and they're roosting. And when it comes into those really cold periods, they'll actually gather with many other chickadees or other small birds just to help each other stay warm. So that's the third one. And the final one I want to talk about is actually an insect. It's another one that's special for me for a few reasons. It's a mayfly. I don't know if you can see this very well, but so this is what the adult looks like, and then this is what the nymph looks like. So insects all go through some sort of metamorphosis. That just means they change their shape or their form during their life cycle. Some of them, like a butterfly, start out as a caterpillar and then they go into a pupa and change their form completely into a butterfly. Now, a mayfly also goes through metamorphosis. It spends most of its life as an aquatic insect. So it's actually living in water, underwater. So this guy right here, this is a huge magnification of a picture. So these nymphs are really small, really tiny. And it's really fun because you can go out there with your kids, pick up rocks and little creeks and look on the bottom of rocks. And you'll see, if you look closely, you may see some of these nymphs crawling around there. So it's a really neat one you can show your kids and talk about. And then when it's ready to change, the nymph swims up to the surface of the water, poof, emerges into its adult winged form, and then it'll be on the surface of the water, and then it flies off. And what I think is really special about mayflies is mayflies actually only live as a winged insect for a very short time. Some of them could live for a day, some of them for a few days. And it's while they're a winged insect, an adult, that they're actually going to mate, and then they lay eggs back on the water. So they come down to the surface of the water, drop their eggs, which sink down to the bottom, and then the nymphs are born again. And the whole cycle starts again. So the mayflies, I find them really special because I enjoy fly fishing. So I enjoy seeing the mayflies out there. It also helps me know what fish are eating because the fish, the trout in the water, they enjoy eating all sorts of aquatic insects. And mayfly is one example. And there's lots of other kinds out there. Next time you're in the river, go ahead, pick up rocks and look under there and see what you can find. It's really fascinating. So these four are some that I really enjoyed. I think they'll have a special place for me in the Rocky Mountains, and I think they're all really good examples to show how different forms of life live and survive in different conditions, and how different life forms go about reproduction. Thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed, and next time you're in the Rocky Mountains, you want to go exploring, you can check out Jake's Nature Guide. Thanks, Mountain Mom. Bye.